So I'm John Craig. I live over in Arlington. I've got an experiment in what's called co-living. For quickly telling those who don't know, WeWork.com, where we are today, has just launched something. Well, this is co-working, and they launched something 2 years ago called WeLive.com, which is co-living. It's coming out of the independent units and experiments in this around the country. They saw a big opportunity. They wouldn't be going into it if it wasn't going to be big. IKEA is just addressing this issue right now. These are giants of industry. So the small experiments, we're wondering, I'm talking to a head of one of the county board members in Arlington on the weekend, and we want to know, how do we think about two things, the parallel between green living and co-living. They're both big changes potentially. And then if we're looking at the spread of co-living, how do we think about finance? Because it might be something that requires real estate finance.
The challenge here is the definitions, green living versus co-living versus other things. And so let me try to address it as best as possible. With co-living in Arlington, we have 26 square miles in Arlington. One of the challenges is making a habitable, comfortable, enjoyable space in a small space. National Building Museum has a great exhibit, just to let you know, Making Home, or Making Room, I think it's called. Great exhibit to talk about that. But with co-living and green living, it allows you to go ahead and to live comfortably in an urban environment like Arlington and take advantage of a lot of these other elements that are built in, such as cabbie bike share, the metro buses, and so on and so forth. The transportation and land use aspects all coalesce into one to make for a very worthwhile, enjoyable living experience with co-living and with green living, in my perspective. The financing piece of this, we want to go ahead through the PACE program to allow for any and all the buildings to increase in value and not have to be torn down and be made more expensive on into the future, but rather we want to create a financing mechanism that looks out to 20 to 25 years to make it easy for that building owner to keep those assets comfortably, financially valuable, but also make them accessible to everybody across the board: teachers, firefighters, public safety officials, and people with more money that they know what to do with. And so that's our goal in Arlington. We want to always keep affordable housing in mind, and PACE is going to be an affordable housing asset-based sort of system that is going to be able to go ahead and help that out in the future.
Are you a broker? Are you a broker, a lender, investor, policy consultant? What is it that Clean does?
We look at a project that you bring to the table. We have dedicated financing partners, and then what we'll do is buy up. Right now, what we're doing is buying up operating solar projects, and we're just about to move into earlier development. We put them into bigger bundles, and then work with. I mentioned the institutional capital that's not at the table. We're working with now institutional capital players who have different type of capital requirements, like insurance companies, labor pension funds, who are then investing in those. So as a developer, yeah, you'd be selling to us or working with you.
This is directed to Rich and to Abby. With the PACE program, can you talk through what the parameters are, kind of the minimum spend of things that are typically done and the maximum spend, and if it's applicable to all CapEx projects that have an intent on reducing energy consumption or otherwise improving building performance?
So basically, most PACE programs go down pretty low to a minimum, maybe 25 or 50K. I think that realistically speaking, in terms of some of the fees that are out there, it's probably better to be at least 150 to 200,000. You can do lower than that, but it starts to, the economics don't work as well when you go really, really low. No, the property owner. So it's all financed as one. So that's one thing, we didn't really have much time to talk about how PACE works, but basically similar to, I think, a lot of the solar projects as well, you're financing everything for the most part. You're financing the actual improvements, the audit costs, the fees from the lenders, fees from the program administrators. So talk louder. Oh, talk more. Okay. But the point is, The point is, some of the products that you work with would be part of that financing. They would be incorporated as part of the project costs, the total project costs. So it depends on the project, but I would say that traditionally, 150, 200K is probably where you're going to really start seeing the economics work. And then maximum, there's been the Clean Fund project that was it 40 or 41 million? Yes, he's waiting. It's 40. Out in California, it was just seismic, just earthquake retrofit, near just south of San Francisco. The second largest, I believe, is a DC United project, which is 25 million. That was done by DC Pace with Eagle Bank. So really large projects can be financed. In Virginia, we have the luxury of new construction like DC. So that really allows for potentially very large projects. So in terms of CapEx, if it meets the parameters in terms of the savings being greater than the overall cost, so the overall savings are more than the overall cost, then it pencils. So really, CapEx is a huge focus, particularly in Virginia where we don't have really high energy costs. But let's let Rich talk about Arlington.
So the specifics in Arlington, 50,000 is the minimum and 25 million is the high end. It's for existing buildings and for new construction. Real quickly, for new construction, when a developer is developing their building, if they go 15 to 20% above the current energy code, they can get 15 to 20% of the total project cost financed through the PACE program. So, and we're using our baseline is what's called ASHRAE 90.1 2010 for all you energy geeks out there. That's the energy code that we're talking about right now. And so that's how it's done. And your answer to the question of the typical types of projects, we talked about solar PV. That's one of the types of projects that's out there. But also, I would say energy efficiency with HVAC systems or the HVAC system components, as well as things like lighting, are some of the more traditional types of projects that you'll see that'll be PACE financed. The beauty of PACE is that you're able to do a project portfolio that allows for some things that pay for themselves in a year or less, like LED lighting, for instance, and combine that with something that may pay out 10, 15 years out. But combined, it is a very good project that over the useful life of the overall project, it's going to pencil out for that property owner.
Can I just say one more time? I just want to say energy efficiency is just as sexy as solar. That's it.
It is. It really is. The point I was going to make about this, though, was that as you look at different technologies, there are different kinds of financing, different ways of financing that make better sense for different ones. So PPA, at least, makes a lot of sense for solar. Energy efficiency, it's going to be comprised of many different measures, a lot of different things that are going on, and you can't really say, oh, this one window I fixed, let's monetize the cash flow on the window. So, like you would with the lease or a PPA. So something like PACE really fits well, where you're taking the underlying real estate value of the asset, you're improving its value, you're getting a bit harder to quantify improvements, but they're definitely there and they're definitely big, and then you can finance against that. So thinking with different technologies, there's different ways that are better.
Good evening. I'm Augustine Cruz with Silverline Communications here in Tysons. I'm also a longtime Arlington resident. And my question is really for everybody, but probably specifically for John. I'm curious to know, with the imminent decision from the White House regarding the USITC trade case, I'm curious to know whether you've, in the last, I guess since, April of last year, March, but certainly since November, have seen any of your deal flow kind of begin to slow down until they figure out what exactly is going to be the upshot from that?
Well, we've seen it happen in the market as we started to look at new build stuff. We call it new build stuff, but stuff in development is if they have not bought their panels already, there's just a complete and utter pause right now in financing it, because that's a major cost in your deal. And if they don't know the cost of the deal, they're not getting financed. So a lot of developers are sitting on ready to go projects. They just don't know what the price of the panel is going to be. And there's actually been players out there, major players, who've taken bets and try to pre-buy panels and then been scammed. It's the longer this goes on, the worse it's in the industry. The reality is, whatever happens, whatever comes out, the certainty is going to be more helpful than whatever the delta is going to be in the panels.
My question has to do with a question of social equity. I think, Montgomery County is a very affluent community. I live in Arlington, and Arlington is a very affluent community. I'm wondering about the leverageability of some of these tools to help create, social equity across our communities. Everyone isn't doing very well. There are struggling communities in our area that we know of. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about kind of some of the tools and how these things can help open the doors for that. And also, Rich, if you could speak to, I think PACE, nonprofit developers can qualify for PACE. Is that true? And so to talk a little bit about that, so for some of those organizations that, aren't part of the, if you will, how these tools can maybe open those doors.
And our mission is to make sure that we're inclusive across all demographic parts of the county, right? And in fact, part of our funding resource requires that 20% of our funds go to make sure that that happens, right? So we've got to make sure that we're creating products that work across that, right? So the products are all available in those spaces, like the commercial and industrial product that we're putting out could be used by any of those. And in fact, the way it's structured, affordable rental housing could take advantage of it. Because it's an unsecured loan, the way their capital stack works, anytime you put a secured loan, forget it, boom, it blows it up, right? So having an unsecured loan does work. The other is we're not limited to one sector, right? So this is our first foray. We're looking at a residential program of a similar nature. And as we bring our money to the table, we're looking to see how do we leverage to make sure lenders and contractors are moving into those spaces. So we're looking at it on the residential side to do a similar product so that they can do energy efficiency inside their homes. We're also looking on the solar side, how we might move into the community solar and support that and incentivize the community solar developers to make a portion of that available to the low mod community, right? Is that how we bring our financing in and bring a lower cost to it so that they, for that, position the subscriptions downstream to the low moderate income households. So it's clearly in our space to sort of make sure that we're covering that. And we're looking, as each one of those sectors come up, how do we incentivize to make sure we're getting into that? And we're going to be held accountable to that.
One point on that, if you're really interested in that space, there's an amazing organization called Grid Alternatives, which is working specifically on getting solar into homes of low income. But not only that, they're doing is a job training component. So they work with folks in those communities to do job training. For instance, with solar installers, it's going so well they can't keep them on staff because they're getting hired away by solar installers. So, but it's a nonprofit just doing amazing work in the community.
I just want to give a shout out to Alex Nguyen, who's doing actually nonprofit solar development in the district. And could he talk a second about what he's doing? Because it's very applicable, I think, to what we're...
Hey, Alex Nguyen with Inflection. And so we're one of about a dozen awardees in the district who got what's called a Solar for All program grant from the District of Columbia. They've been collecting for years alternative compliance payments under the renewable portfolio standard in the district. So now they're using those millions of dollars that they've collected to deploy solar on low-income and affordable housing around the district, both single-family and multifamily properties. And so there's a lot of folks right now who are working on community solar models. We're working on doing carports at affordable housing properties, and Grid Alternatives is doing single-family homes in the district. So DC is really the epicenter in the country for bringing solar to the low-income community. So you really hit on something great, and there's a big community here to get into that space.